Trends have gone crazy with this concept, and you don't even know what to think anymore when it comes to feminine or masculine energy. Today we'll see what feminine vs masculine meant in different ancient cultures, its roots around the world, different opinions of the roles of men and women so that they can live in harmony together, what feminine energy trends mean today. Get ready for some controversial topics as well, and actionable steps and ways that you can live with your natural feminine energy instead of against it. Today we're obviously going to be talking about the two genders, men and women. So if you identify as like a blue car or as a fox, this is not the podcast for you. Otherwise, let's go. And remember, today I'll be talking about open ideas and concepts to open our minds and think about different interesting things so that we can grow our worldview and notion of things. I'm not going to talk about rules that you should respect or tell you to think a certain way. That's totally your choice and your opinion to build. This podcast is a tool to help you grow and make your own idea of femininity or masculinity, to grow with that. Most of the things that I'll say are from external sources like concepts of feminine or masculine 3,000 years ago in Egypt, unless I start my sentence with I think, which is obviously my opinion. The podcast chapters will be broken down into what did so-called feminine and masculine energy mean in ancient cultures like ancient Egypt, Taoist China, Vedic India, ancient Greece, and indigenous cultures. The second chapter is about the definition of feminine and masculine energy in our modern society that you see on the trends online. What does it mean to be feminine today? Number 3 is going to be a lot of hot controversial topics, including the dangers of anti-men or anti-woman concepts, feminism standards and values. Feel free to comment down what you think on those after that chapter. And the fourth chapter is how we could aim for respect and harmony to be more powerful instead of being in a constant gender war, and actionable steps that you can do today to live more in your feminine energy instead of against it. So let's get into what ancient culture thought about femininity and masculinity. In a lot of cultures, they are viewed as complementary forces that balance each other out, kind of like the concept of the yin and yang. They're separate from gender and more like energetic principles that show by the way that you think and act. That's why a man can be feminine or a woman more masculine. Usually, femininity is linked with receptiveness, creativity, flow, ease, emotions, intuition. And in ancient cultures, it's often linked to the moon, night, water, and the earth. Masculinity is often associated with structure, protection, logic, drive, focus, assertiveness. It's linked to the sun, the day, the fire, and the sky. Of course, each human being has a different ratio of both masculine and feminine, but we'll talk about this later on. The first ancient culture we're going to explore is Taoist China, so 25 to 220 years after Christ, and it was compared to, or femininity and masculinity were compared to the yin and yang. So the yin was the feminine side, more dark, cold, soft, and receptive, while the yang, the masculine side, is more described as tough, strong, active, hot, and bright, like the sun. And harmony comes when both are balanced. Neither is superior, each one completes each other, which I think beautifully illustrates equality in genders. They both have roles that are equally important for balance. They're just different, almost like opposites sometimes, but neither is superior. Just 150 years ago, women could not vote and were considered like helpless children that would get half the wage of men. Read that in a history book, which was true for France at least in the beginning of the 20th century. And now it's changed, thank God, but some people nowadays are saying that women are superior and men are all trash and incapable. And a lot of people are degrading men like that, which I really don't like that kind of talk. I think it's really harmful and just makes more inequality just the other way around. But anyways, moving on to ancient Egypt. And in ancient Egypt, there were goddesses like Isis, which represented divine feminine energy. She was the goddess of motherhood, fertility, magic, and healing. And she really embodied nurturing, strength, and divine power. Gods like Osiris were the opposite, and he represented order, structure, and kingship. He was the masculine god, or he represented masculinity. Men and women also had complementary roles in this ancient culture, and women were seen as life givers who had the sacred and magical gift of giving life, and men more as protectors, providers, and builders. Some Egyptian myths show the masculine as the form giver or the stabilizer, and the feminine as the life force that animates the masculine, kind of like fills the cup in a way. There are two pieces of a puzzle that complete each other. I read some books that accurately described daily life in ancient Egypt, and it's true that from what I read, women and men were very equal in ancient civilizations. Women were not seen as inferior in ancient civilizations. Not only in Egypt, but also in Vedic India, men and women were equal. They just had different roles so that society would work well. It deteriorated much later. In Vedic India, our third ancient civilization, the divine feminine takes the form of the god Shakti, and without Shakti, Shiva, the masculine divine, is passive and inert. They need both sides to be alive. Masculine represents consciousness, and the feminine represents creative energy. In Vedic astrology, the quality of masculine energy is interpreted by the placement of the sun, and the feminine by the moon. That really relates to Chinese views of yin and yang, incredibly. I mean, they share like thousands of kilometers of borders, so maybe not that strange after all. But feminine energy is seen as sacred and powerful, but must be honored and balanced with masculine logic and action. And of course, these are traits that I'm using to represent like masculine, feminine, because ancient civilizations represented it that way. But of course, some women have logic a lot of women have logic and action and are smart. But of course, it's balanced. I'm just talking about like the extreme opposites of how they described it. And in ancient Greece, which is the fourth one, mythology was very present in daily life, with the temples of gods and goddesses, with prayers, animal sacrifices, libations, and festivals. And most homes had a household altar. Their views on femininity differ a little when it comes to their goddesses, and these differences are really interesting. Like goddesses like Demeter, which represent nurturing and motherhood, were present, but also Artemis, which was wild and independent, and showed different facets of feminine energy, which differs from the previous one we've explored. If you used to be a huge Percy Jackson and Olympians fan like me, or still are, like how can you stop loving these books, you might know these goddesses and gods. You might think of Annabeth, the daughter of Athena, who represented her qualities really well. Because there's also, Athena, that is the goddess of wisdom, intelligence, and strategic war, while Ares, the masculine god of war, was tied to more bloodthirsty emotional war, while Athena was the goddess of strategic war. I think these little differences are really interesting to notice because they differ from the previous ancient cultures. And then the fifth and last one is the indigenous cultures. There are 5,000 different indigenous cultures in the world, according to the UN at least. So this is a very wide topic, but to make it short, many native tribes honored feminine energy as the source of life and wisdom. Women were seen as keepers of the earth, cycles, and community, and men as hunters, protectors, and builders. Roles were distinct but respected. Everyone has or had a purpose in the tribe so that life works in a harmonious way. I think that maybe today society is so crazy because maybe we are unbalanced when it comes to these roles. But that's just a hypothesis, of course. But now let's move on to the second chapter, which is the definition of feminine and masculine energy in our modern society. What trends say about feminine energy and masculine energy. To represent these trends really well, I'm going to use Tam Kaur's videos on the subject, or the information that she shares in her videos, because I think her videos are the best at summarizing the most positive ideas of the modern view of femininity. I'll explore her main points, but before I start, of course, she does not say that women should not build careers and become financially literate and financially free. She's just saying that after having to be disciplined, productive, self-reliant, and assertive, you can come back to your femininity to avoid feeling burnt out or disconnected. Having said that, the main points are centered around working with nature rather than being against it. For example, she talks about fulfillment over performance, where you pay attention to what you're feeling if you're present, and just preserving your inner peace, because it matters more than fighting for success or, being constantly hyper-productive and performing and worrying about what others think of you, and giving yourself rest and compassion, which is really important. The second thing is expressing your emotions freely. In many ancient cultures, women are said to have this natural magical intuition and being able to express their emotions, and I think this is something we can really cultivate. Rather than shutting down your feelings, you can invite to embrace them, to feel and release and express without apologizing, and not perceive that as a weakness but as a strength. I know that for me it's a big problem because I refuse to express my emotions, and I'm very masculine in that side of myself. But of course, we're all different. That's just me. It's probably different for you. She also talks about living softly, tenderly, and gracefully, but not as in physically. It's not about being feminine is not about having certain clothes or owning certain things, but it's just about your mindset and the way you think and the way you perceive life. And she says that instead of thinking you have to rush all the time, you let yourself live more slowly and peacefully, which is what she means by grace. And by tenderly, I think she really means compassion towards yourself and others as well. There's also softness and vulnerability as authentic power rather than weakness. And when I mean vulnerability, I mean more emotional vulnerability, not being defenseless. I think women should know how to defend themselves and be capable of doing things that men can, but just living in that way, emotional vulnerability. You're not afraid to express your emotions and show others what you feel. And finally, to know your worth and know that you were born worthy, instead of trying to do things to be worthy or trying to impress others by working harder to be recognized by peers, which is recognized as a really masculine trait, to work really hard to earn your worth. The masculine and feminine were separated by her as the masculine being dominant and finding worth in providing and doing and helping to fix certain things, while the feminine was described as receiving, finding worth in just herself being her, and being submissive as in she surrenders control in situations and observes. I don't mean submissive as powerless. That's not what I mean at all. I mean, she doesn't worry about controlling the situation. She's not it's not going my way, so I'm just going to try and control it to I don't like the way it's going, so I'm going to try and force it to be how I want it to be, which is also something I do a lot, and I'm trying to stop that, to be controlling. Now moving on to the third chapter, which is a lot of hot controversial topics, including, the dangers of anti or anti-woman concepts, feminism standards and values, etc. I'm going to be expressing my opinions on certain subjects here. You might not agree, you might. Just say what you think in the comments. I would love to know. A lot of people consider that forms of feminism or concepts of feminine energy have gone too far, there's plenty of articles on that on the internet. There's so much information. I mean, you see women in their cars doing TikToks on how they want a rich man so that they can not work, basically, and afford luxury items. There's been a bunch of cases in the US where women married rich men, then divorced and took half their fortune. Probably happened in other countries as well. I mean, it's probably not an isolated case like in the US. Maybe you've heard of what I'm talking about, maybe not, but now the common word gold digger is not unknown to most people. When it comes to feminism, some women think and say that women should not clean or cook, that men should do that. The women are not, home slaves, which of course is true. But I think that's not very equal, that sharing chores is the best. But I think that the fact that women deny doing the more feminine things is a shame. Because before, they had more value in all the things women could do. Women are traditionally more, or are said to be more talented in handicrafts, for example, because they have smaller fingers and are able to have more patience maybe, or it's just a more feminine thing. I don't just mean childbearing. I mean things like being talented at, could be creativity. We said earlier that women were more talented at creative work. Some men are also creative, of course. But I mean things like cooking, dancing, painting, handicrafts like embroidery, things like that. What I said, or when I say housekeeping, I don't mean cleaning. I mean like home decor, organizing a really pretty house. I feel like in general, women might care more about how their house looks like they want a really aesthetic, beautiful house. Some men might care less about that. What I said might sound very traditional or controversial to some, but I have a nice quote to illustrate what I'm trying to say. It's a quote from, we think, William Galden. Whatever you give a woman, she will make greater. If you give her sperm, she'll give you a baby. If you give her a house, she'll give you a home. If you give her groceries, she'll give you a meal. If you give her a smile, she'll give you her heart. She multiplies and enlarges what is given to her. And the last sentence, which I find really funny. So if you give her any crap, be ready to receive a ton of skirt. I can't say the word, the actual bad word, but yeah. What I wanted to illustrate was that some modern women, not all, but some, refuse to have children, refuse to build a home or take care of it, or refuse to cook, refuse to give all their heart and genuine divine love. And if you don't want to have, or if some people don't want to have children, that's fine. I'm talking about certain people who say that. So according to William Galden, a woman amplifies what you give her, and that gives her value. But now some women refuse to do the things that he says gives them value. But that's just an isolated opinion. But anyways, that was my point. When it comes to feminism, I think it's a noble fight that all women around the world are able to vote, that all girls and women have access to education, the same work opportunities as men, the same respect, the same treatment, etc., that they're equal and work together to create a better society. That's amazing. But I think in Europe recently, some people pushed it a little, with some women going as far as being anti-men and degrading them and saying that all men are trash and that they're incapable. And that just reverses the inequality. It's not solving anything. It just aggravates hate. And when something extremely serious happens outside of Europe, like an extreme violation of women's rights in other countries, nothing much is done to help them, which I find pretty messed up. And when it comes to standards and values, there's so much to say. I think having high standards is amazing, but I think anyone with very high standards has to be doing self-development and inner work on themselves. Because when I think about the standards that I want in a friendship and the qualities that I want in a friend, like trust or compassion, loyalty, kindness, a mindset of self-love and love for others and self-growth and positivity, I try to work on these qualities on myself first. I try to acquire those positive traits myself. Tam Kaur, for example, I was a bit shocked at first when I was looking at her videos because she has extremely high standards when it comes to friendships, any kind of relationship. But she also has really healthy relationships in all areas, and she's doing so much work on herself, and it amazes me how this girl is growing so fast and is just building businesses like everywhere, and is growing so fast and doing so much work on herself. I find it normal for her to have extremely high standards because she herself has high standards with herself, if you know what I mean. If you have specific ideas or opinions, please feel free to express them respectfully in the comments, or what you think of some dilemmas. It could be really, really interesting to discuss that together. The fourth chapter is how we could aim for respect and harmony to be more powerful instead of being in a constant gender war, and how women can be more in their feminine energy. The first step, in my opinion, would be to stop degrading the other gender or wanting one to be superior. 100 years ago, it was, women are as capable as children and intellectually far inferior than men, so we should just restrict their rights as human beings, yay. And now today, which was wrong, by the way, I'm just saying, I don't agree with that. But now, today, some people become anti-men, like it doesn't make sense. Why can't we just work together? History has shown us that when masculine and feminine energies work together, societies thrive. Why did they thrive like that? How did they manage to work together so well? Is it because they had specific roles and they just stuck to these kind of roles? And that's why it works so well? I don't know, that's another episode. The second thing, in my opinion, is to regain balance. So you can start to try and be more in touch with your feminine energy. That sounds very trendy, but how else could I say it? Live with a softer, more accepting mindset for yourself and others, and just feel good and worthy in who you are. Essentially, feminine energy is a mindset. It's a way of thinking. It's characterized by the way you think every day. And by being authentic and not changing your behavior to please people, I firmly believe that you will attract people who will love you for who you are, because you're being who you are and you're not being someone else. And we can learn to receive and stop rushing while thriving in a career or whatever there is you want to do. I know that with me, I have problems, or when it comes to receiving, when someone, for example, maybe it's the same with you, when it comes to a compliment, if someone compliments you or compliments me, I feel like I should say, oh no, but don't, it's not true. If someone calls me pretty or something, I want to say, oh no, it's not true. Or if someone gives me a gift, I just never know how to say thank you and just receive. So that's something you and I can work on. Finding a balance of masculine and feminine is also essential because everyone has a unique ratio of masculine and feminine traits. You can't really fit one extreme, especially when you're navigating different eras of your life with their unique sets of challenges. I know that personally, when I start working on an important project, I can be very bossy and take control of the direction of the project, which is a really masculine trait. And I don't want to change that because I get awesome results for my work. In other aspects of my life, however, I can be more feminine. I have my own ratio and you have yours. And I'd love for you to share in the comments how you balance both energies in your life. Another thing that we can do as women or girls is to pay attention to our period cycles, something I started to get interested in, or like really interested in recently, because our levels of energy will greatly shift throughout the month. It's also called cycle syncing, but like going deeper into that, like even adapting your workouts, your activities, and your lifestyle, and even your nutrition, like your food, to your monthly cycle so that you can feel more energized and like support yourself through that cycle. Paying attention to your emotional cycles and changes in emotions, since they tend to pile up and aggravate near our periods, can be really helpful. And you can have a journal for this where you track your emotions. Because in the book, The Power of Now, from Eckhart Tolle, which I really liked, he says that time around your period is a great opportunity for self-growth for women, because you can observe as these negative emotions arise and learn to understand more where they're coming from and learn more about yourself. Because apparently it's really feminine to be in your emotions and pay attention to your emotions and be in tune with your emotions. Again, that sounds really trendy, but it's the truth. You can really track how you're feeling and live with your emotions instead of against them. I personally have to stop shutting down my feelings. It's something I do a lot. Again, something fun to work on. It's the point of self-growth. But this is actually the end of this episode. I'm glad you listened until the end. I hope you learned some new things and are inspired to build your own opinions on this kind of topic. I would love for you to share what you think in the comments about anything. Share your thoughts, as it's always really interesting to have different ideas being shared on controversial topics like these, because this is how you can grow your mindset and your worldview. Remember that this episode is available both on Spotify and YouTube. Check out my Instagram for healthy, easy recipes or bullet journal inspiration, motivation, and lifestyle. My cat is calling me right now. I have to go take care of her. Tag me on or DM me on there. Subscribe if my podcast is your jam. And I'll see you next Monday, same time, same place for a brand new episode.